Welcome, welcome. In this lesson, we'll be going over building out the back bumper area. I've got the corresponding start file open here in 3D Studio Max, and I also have my reference up in Photoshop. This is my concept image here, and this kind of gives us an idea of what the back bumper area is looking like. I also have several photographs up as well of the actual car. And so what I did here was I just went ahead and masked out the rest of the vehicle. So all I'm looking at is the bumper. And this works for me because it kind of helps me to simplify things. Initially looking at this, it can seem a little daunting. My approach here is to just try and break this down into its bigger components. So I'll ignore any little extraneous bits and pieces. And what I'm focused on here now is there's majorly two pieces. There's this whole bottom area here. I'll just highlight that. So there's this whole area here. And then there is the upper piece, which is this big bad boy here. And so what I'll do is I'll build it as two pieces. And then if I wanted to, I could go in and seam these in. For this lesson and also sakes and purposes, I'll just go ahead and keep these as two separate pieces. The important takeaway here is that you break this down into simpler forms, and you can approach modeling each piece a little easier that way. I've got a couple more reference images that I've got on my second monitor, and so I'll be looking at those while I'm building the model as well. All right, back in 3D Studio Max, I've got my reference images here, my reference outlines, and I'll switch to my back viewport. And so I'll notice that there is, this area here, and we'll start by building it there. We're going to use symmetry on this, of course, so we wouldn't have to build the entire thing. We would probably stop at a center point here and then just mirror everything over. All right, that being said, I'll just go ahead and drop the opacity on my blueprint so I can see what I'm doing. And while still in my back view, I'll grab my line tool. I'll just and then uncheck enable viewpoint so we can just see a simple spline. And I'll just drag out points that roughly match up with the outline here. All right, once that is done, I'll switch to my top view and see where I'm at. Then I'll just grab that and move it out. I'll switch to my right view. Move that in a little. Grab these verts here. Move them in so they follow this slope here. Grab these verts, move around just to see what I'm doing. Switch back. And move those in. Now, at this point, when you're looking at it, it's obvious that this will have to follow the curve off the back of the car here. You'd be tempted to go in and just try and sort of curve this right now, but it's easier to model things with set angles and then add like a bend modifier to get the curve, or use freeform deformations or things like that to bend it afterwards, instead of trying to bend it now and then trying to model with the bend. On the same token, you could still leave these straight, build things out, and then go ahead and try to tweak the shape. We have a simple enough form here though, so we should be okay leaving it like this. I'll switch back to my back view just to make sure everything here looks good. And then what we're going to do now is I'll go ahead and enable in viewport where it says rendering. That'll give my line thickness. I'll set my sides to 4. Typically, these are the default values of 2 and 2, I believe it is. And I'll set my thickness to 4 as well. I'll set my angle to 45. Let's go ahead and see what that does. Or actually, let's set the angle back to 0. What you're trying to do here is to get your faces to be somewhat planar. I'll go ahead and add an edit poly modifier, and I think the line settings had previous settings that I was using. Okay, with the edit poly modifier applied, I'll just go ahead, switch to edge mode, grab these edges here, ring, delete, and delete. All I'm needing is this piece here. Then I'll just switch to border mode, grab that border there, switch to my right viewport, and I'll just hold shift and drag. And so right away that gives us, I'll isolate, that gives us that. If I hop back into Photoshop, you can see that we're not all the way there yet, but we're getting the basic shape down. The other thing I need to do is hop back to my reference, and I'll note that there's a small connection here, and we'll need to account for that. And so you can see that it goes in slightly. So back in 3D Studio Max, what we do is just make sure we drag until we have about roughly the thickness we need, then we'll shift drag again. And then we could continue on our merry way. And so what we did there was we just left an area where we can actually put that piece in. Alrighty, next thing we do is we take our Swift Loop tool, and I'll just go ahead and add a loop there. I'll switch to my back viewport, exit isolation mode so we can see what's happening, and then I'll add another loop there. I'll switch to vertex mode, grab verts, and I'm just repositioning them so they sit roughly where this piece connects. Once that's done, I'll just switch to face mode, select these faces, switch back to my back viewport, and I'll just extrude those faces and reposition them to match with the reference here. And for extrusion, I'm using my hotkey, which is Alt-E. I'll isolate, and I'll hop back into Photoshop and look at my reference, and you can see that there's a tiny bit of a lip here. So what I can do for that is I'll just go ahead, undo all that. I'll deselect that face. Whoops. Switch back to my back viewport, and we'll just redo the extrusion. And sometimes you'll lose your selection there. I'll just hit space to lock my selection. Switch back to the back viewport. Alt-E to extrude. Drag that out. Reposition. Alt-E to extrude again. And I'll just zoom in. And now you can see let me isolate so we can see what's going on here. We've got the little bit of a lip there. And this is following our curve. What I do here too at this point is to quickly add a turbo smooth modifier just so we can see what's happening. Be sure to unlock your selection there. And so you can see that we're roughly getting what we're needing here. I'll toggle between end results. Then from here on, you'd be using your Swift Loop tool to just kind of add some sharpness to areas as needed. Alrighty. And so this is primarily for demonstration purposes. I wouldn't add in my control edges until I've gotten everything built out. And then another easy way to add your control loops here is you can actually go to edge mode, select any edge here, hit Alt-R to ring, and then Alt-A, which is the hotkey we have set up. Set your segments to 2, and you've quickly added in your control edges there as well. Just another way to do it. And so we'd continue on that, building out all the different pieces. And then eventually we'd mirror everything over. That concludes this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next.